The vastness of space stretched out before Zara, a tapestry of stars punctuated by the looming silhouette of Nexus 9. The galactic prison station hung in the void like a monstrous beast, its angular form a stark contrast to the cosmic ballet that surrounded it. Zara's transport shuttle, little more than a tin can compare to the massive station, approached with ominous inevitability. Zara's wrists chafed against the energy cuffs that bound her. She was the only human aboard, surrounded by a motley crew of alien convicts, each more bizarre than the last. A Vrexian to her left, its tentacles writhing with nervous energy. A Zorn warrior to her right, mandibles clicking in what might have been anticipation or hunger. Zara couldn't tell. The shuttle jolted as it entered Nexus 9's docking bay. Zara's stomach lurched, a combination of the rough landing and the weight of her situation. She hadn't committed the crime she'd been convicted of, but out here, light years from Earth, that hardly mattered. She was just another piece of galactic debris, swept up and discarded in this corner of the universe. As the airlock hissed open, a wave of recycled air washed over the new arrivals. It carried the stench of too many species crammed into too small a space, underlined by the sharp tang of disinfectant and the metallic hint of old blood. Zara's nostrils flared, taking it in, cataloging it. Information was survival, and she intended to survive. Move it, meat. A guard barked, its translator barely keeping up with the guttural sounds of its native tongue. Zara recognized a species, a Krax, all muscle and scales, with a temper to match. She filed that away too. The new inmates shuffled forward, a mismatched parade of the galaxy's unwanted. Zara kept her head down, but her eyes alert, taking in every detail. The loading bay was a hive of activity, inmates of every conceivable shape and size moving cargo, supervised by more Krax guards. In the distance, she could see other new arrivals being processed. As they approached the processing station, Zara caught snippets of conversation from the guards. Another batch of fodder for the mines, one growled. That human won't last a cycle, another replied, mandibles clicking in what might have been laughter. Zara's jaw tightened, but she kept moving. Let them underestimate her. It would be their mistake. The processing was swift and impersonal. Retinal scans, DNA samples, the uncomfortable buzz of a subdermal tracker being implanted at the base of her skull. Through it all, Zara remained silent, watchful. She noted the layout of the room, the positions of the guards, the barely concealed fear in the eyes of her fellow inmates. Name. The bored voice of the processing clerk cut through her observations. Zara Vega, she replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. The clerk, a spindly creature with too many eyes, didn't even look up as it entered her information. Species, human. Crime, industrial espionage. Sentence, 15 cycles. It paused, all of its eyes suddenly focusing on Zara. Recommendation, general population, mining division. Zara's heart sank. The mines were notorious, even out here on the fringes of civilized space. Few survived a single cycle, let alone 15. But she couldn't let the fear show. Not here, not now, next. The clerk called, and Zara was hustled away, deeper into the bowels of Nexus 9. The cell block was a cacophony of sounds, smells, and sights that assaulted Zara's senses. Rows upon rows of cells stretched out before her, each housing a diverse array of galactic criminals. Some howled and rattled their bars as the new inmates passed, while others watched with predatory silence. Zara was shoved unceremoniously into a cell, the energy field snapping into place behind her with a crackle. She took in her new home, a bare metal slab that served as a bed, a small wash basin, and a waste reclamation unit. Luxury accommodations by Nexus 9 standards. Her cellmate, a hulking creature with leathery grey skin and 4 arms, regarded her with what might have been curiosity or hunger. It was hard to tell with non-human species. Fresh meat, it rumbled, its translator struggling with the deep tones of its voice. Human, yes, soft, weak, won't last long here. Zara met its gaze steadily. "I'm tougher than I look," she said, her voice low but firm. The creature's mouth split in what might have been a grin, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "We'll see, human. We'll see." As night fell, or what passed for night in the perpetual twilight of the station, Zara lay on her hard bunk, mind racing. She knew she had to adapt quickly if she was to survive. The mines would be brutal, but they would also be an opportunity. Information, allies, resources, all could be found there if she was clever enough. She thought of Earth, so far away now. Of a life she'd left behind, the dreams she'd had. Of the injustice that had landed her here. Anger flared in her chest, but she tamped it down. Anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not yet. Instead, she focused on what she did have. Her mind, her skills, her determination. They couldn't take those from her, no matter how hard they tried. In the darkness of her cell, Zara began to plan. The next morning, or what passed for morning in the timeless rhythm of the station, came too soon. Zara was jolted awake by the harsh blare of alarms, signaling the start of the work cycle. Her cellmate was already up, its forearms stretching in a disturbing display of alien physiology. "Up, human," it growled. "Mine waits for no one." Zara rose, her body protesting after a night on the unyielding metal slab. She followed the stream of inmates out of the cell block, noting the routines, the hierarchies that were already apparent. Some inmates moved with confidence, others huddled in groups for protection. The weak and isolated were easy to spot. They were the ones with fresh bruises and haunted eyes. The mining operation was located in the bowels of Nexus 9, where asteroids rich in rare minerals were brought in and processed. As Zara descended in a rickety lift with a group of other inmates, the air grew thick with dust and the acrid smell of industrial chemicals. The mine itself was a nightmare of noise and chaos. Massive drills bit into the rock, sending showers of sparks and debris into the air. Conveyor belts groaned under the weight of ore, and the shouts of guards and overseers barely carried over the din. Zara was assigned to a sorting station, where she would spend hours sifting through crushed rock for valuable minerals. It was mind-numbing work, made worse by the oppressive heat and the constant threat of violence from both guards and fellow inmates. As she worked, Zara observed. She noted which guards were cruel and which were merely indifferent. She watched the interactions between inmates, identifying the power players and the outcasts, and she listened, picking up snippets of conversation, rumors, and gossip that floated through the stale air. It was during her third shift that she noticed him. A Silosian, its iridescent scales, dulled by the mine's grime, working a few stations down. What caught Zara's attention wasn't its appearance, but its hands, six-fingered and moving with a dexterity that seemed out of place in this brutal environment. As she watched, the Silosian's hands blurred over its workstation, and suddenly a small piece of equipment, a hydro spanner, used for maintaining the conveyor belts, vanished. Zara blinked, unsure if she had really seen what she thought she had. The Silosian must have felt her gaze. It turned, compound eyes fixing on her with an unsettling intensity. For a moment, Zara thought she had made a terrible mistake. Then, almost imperceptibly, the Silosian nodded. It was a tiny thing, that nod. But in that moment, Zara felt the first stirring of hope since she had arrived on Nexus 9. Here, perhaps, was someone with skills that could be useful, someone who might be open to collaboration. As the work shift dragged on, Zara's mind raced with possibilities. She had always been good at putting pieces together, seeing patterns where others saw only chaos. It was what had made her such a successful industrial researcher back on Earth, and what had ultimately led to her false conviction when her discoveries threatened the wrong people. Now, those same skills might be the key to her survival. The Silosian's sleight of hand suggested a network, a system of contraband and information flowing beneath the surface of Nexus 9's rigid control. If she could tap into that network, but first she needed an in, and for that, she needed to take a risk. As the shift neared its end, Zara maneuvered her way closer to the Silosian's workstation. Timing it carefully, she stumbled, sending a cascade of ore samples across the floor. As she knelt to clean up the mess, she found herself face to face with the alien. Clumsy human, it chittered, but there was no real venom in its voice. "Sorry," Zara murmured, then added in a whisper, "Nice trick with the hydrospanner." The Silosian froze for a fraction of a second, its compound eyes glittering. Then, moving with that uncanny speed, it pressed something small and cold into Zara's hand. "Careful, meat," it hissed. "Curiosity kills more than cats in this place." Before Zara could respond, a guard's shout cut through the air. "Back to work, scum." Zara scrambled back to her station, heart pounding. In her palm, hidden from view, was a small data chip. She didn't dare examine it now, not with the guards watching, but its weight was a promise of information, of possibility, of hope. As she was herded back to her cell at the end of the shift, Zara's mind whirled with plans and contingencies. She had taken her first step into Nexus 9's underground economy. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also her best chance at survival, and maybe, just maybe, at finding a way to clear her name and get back home. In the darkness of her cell, as her cellmate's snores filled the air, Zara allowed herself a small smile. The game was on, and she intended to play it to win in the cycles that followed her arrival at Nexus 9. Zara learned to navigate the treacherous currents of prison life. The data chip from the Silosian, which she'd carefully hidden in a small crevice in her cell, proved to be a treasure trove of information. It contained partial maps of the station, guard rotations, and most importantly, a list of potential allies. Zara bided her time, watching and waiting for the right moment to make her move. She knew that any misstep could be fatal in this environment where every species was fighting for survival. It was during a particularly grueling shift in the mines that Zara's opportunity finally presented itself. She was working alongside a Quilaxian, a species known for their incredible strength and stoic nature. The Quilaxian, who Zara had learned was called Drek, was struggling with a malfunctioning drill. Zara approached cautiously. "Need a hand," she offered, keeping her voice low to avoid drawing attention from the guards. Drek's crystalline eyes narrowed suspiciously. What could a human possibly do to help? "I was an engineer back on Earth," Zara replied, her hands already moving towards the drill. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, Drek stepped aside. Zara quickly identified the problem, a misaligned power coupling, and set about fixing it. Her fingers, smaller and more dexterous than Drek's massive digits, made quick work of the delicate components. As the drill hummed back to life, Drek's crystalline structure shifted in what Zara had come to recognize as surprise. "You have skill, human," Drek rumbled. "Perhaps you are not as useless as you appear." Zara allowed herself a small smile. "Appearances can be deceiving," she said, "especially in a place like this." From that moment, a tentative alliance was formed. Drek, impressed by Zara's technical skills, began to watch out for her during their shifts. In return, Zara helped maintain Drek's equipment, ensuring the Quilaxian met the brutal quotas set by the prison overseers. But Zara knew 2 allies weren't enough. She needed a network, a team with diverse skills, if she was to have any hope of surviving or escaping Nexus 9. Her next target was the Silosian who had given her the data chip. It took several shifts of careful maneuvering, but Zara finally managed to work her way to the alien station without arousing suspicion. "I never got to thank you for your gift," Zara murmured, her eyes on her work as her hands sifted through ore samples. The Silosian's antennae twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about, human," it chittered, but Zara caught the faint undercurrent of interest in its voice. "Of course not," Zara replied smoothly. "But hypothetically, if someone were to have information about, say, guard rotations or supply shipments, I might be able to put that information to good use. Hypothetically." The Silosian was silent for a long moment, its compound eyes unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, it nodded. "I'm called Zix," it said softly, "and I believe we may have much to discuss, human." With Drek's strength and Zix's information network, Zara's plans began to take shape, but she knew they needed more. They needed someone with medical knowledge, someone who could navigate the complex social hierarchies of the prison, and someone who could bypass the station's security systems. It was Zix who introduced her to Lyra, a Ventusian empath who worked in the prison's medical bay. Lyra's species was known for their ability to sense and influence emotions, a skill that had kept her alive in the cutthroat environment of Nexus 9. "Why should I help you?" Lyra asked when Zara approached her, her luminescent skin pulsing with skepticism. "Because you're tired," Zara replied, meeting the Ventusian's glowing eyes. "Tired of patching up the same inmates cycle after cycle, tired of feeling their pain and fear. You want change, even if you won't admit it to yourself." Lyra's skin flickered, a kaleidoscope of colors that betrayed her surprise and interest. "You're perceptive for a human," she said finally. "Perhaps there's more to you than meets the eye." With Lyra on board, their little group began to grow. The Ventusians' connections in the medical bay proved invaluable, providing them with restricted medicines and access to parts of the station normally off-limits to regular inmates. But they still lacked a crucial piece, someone who could crack Nexus 9's formidable security systems. That's where Rax came in. Rax was a Volucrian, a species of avian humanoids known for their sharp minds and sharper talons. He had been a master hacker before his capture, and his skills had only grown more refined in the confined and challenging environment of the prison. Convincing Rax to join them was Zara's greatest challenge yet. The Volucrian was notoriously paranoid, trusting no one and keeping to himself. It took weeks of careful observation and planning before Zara felt ready to make her approach. She cornered Rax in a secluded part of the exercise yard, away from prying eyes and ears. "I have a proposition for you," she said without preamble. Rax's feathers ruffled, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Not interested," he squawked, turning to leave. "What if I told you I could get you access to a level 3 data spike?" Zara said quickly, playing her trump card. Rax froze. A level 3 data spike was a hacker's dream, capable of bypassing even the most sophisticated security protocols. They were also incredibly rare, especially in a place like Nexus 9. "You're bluffing," Rax said, but he didn't leave. Zara smiled. "Am I? You're not the only one with connections, Rax. Help us, and the data spike is yours." It took more convincing, more promises, and a demonstration of the partial match she'd gotten from Zix, but eventually, Rax agreed to join their alliance. With her core team assembled, Zara began to put her plan into motion. Each member brought unique skills and resources to the table. Drek's strength and stoic nature made him the perfect enforcer, keeping other inmates at bay. Zix's information network gave them eyes and ears throughout the station. Lyra's empathic abilities allowed them to navigate the complex social dynamics of the prison, sensing potential threats or opportunities. And Rax's hacking skills promised to be the key to their eventual escape. But as their influence grew, so did the dangers. The established power structures of Nexus 9 didn't take kindly to newcomers, upsetting the delicate balance. Rumors began to circulate, whispers of a human leading a group that was amassing power and resources. It came to a head during a routine meal in the prison cafeteria. Zara and her team were sitting together, discussing their next move in hushed tones, when a shadow fell over their table. Zara looked up to see a massive Chronax, its exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. Behind it stood a group of other inmates, a motley crew of the biggest and meanest species Nexus 9 had to offer. Well, the Chronax rumbled, its mandibles clicking in amusement. "If it isn't the little human and her band of misfits, you've been making waves, meat. Some folks aren't too happy about that." Zara felt her team tensing around her, ready for a fight. But she knew that open conflict now, when they weren't fully prepared, could destroy everything they'd worked for. She stood slowly, meeting the Chronax's compound eyes. "We're not looking for trouble," she said calmly. "We're just trying to survive, same as everyone else." The Chronax leaned in, its hot breath washing over Zara. "Survival? Is that what he calls stockpiling supplies, gathering information, disrupting the natural order of things? No, human, you're playing a dangerous game, and games have winners and losers." Zara felt a bead of sweat trickle down her spine, but she held her ground. "And which are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. For a tense moment, silence reigned in the cafeteria. Every eye was on them, inmates and guards alike holding their breath to see what would happen next. Then, unexpectedly, the Chronax laughed. It was a harsh, grating sound that set Zara's teeth on edge. "You've got guts, human. I'll give you that. But guts alone won't keep you alive in here. Watch your step. Next time, we won't be having a friendly chat." With that, the Chronax and its gang moved away, leaving Zara and her team shaken but unharmed. As the noise level in the cafeteria slowly returned to normal, Zara sank back into her seat. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her mind was already racing, analyzing the encounter, looking for advantages, for weaknesses they could exploit. "That was too close," Lyra murmured, her skin pulsing with residual fear and relief. "No," Zara replied, a grim smile playing on her lips. "That was perfect. They shown their hand, revealed their fear. Now we know who our real enemies are." She looked around at her team, seeing the determination in their alien faces. "This is where it really begins. Are you with me?" One by one, they nodded. Drek's crystalline structure gleamed with resolve. Zik's antennae quivered with excitement. Lyra's skin glowed with a fierce loyalty. And Rax's feathers stood on end, a sign of his readiness for action. In that moment, Zara knew that they had crossed a threshold. They were no longer just survivors, scraping by day to day. They were revolutionaries, preparing to challenge the very foundations of Nexus 9. As they left the cafeteria, Zara's mind was already formulating their next move. The Chronax and its gang had made their threat, but they had also revealed their fear. Fear of change, fear of losing their power, and fear, Zara knew, could be weaponized. Their alliance had been forged in the brutal crucible of Nexus 9. Now it was time to put it to the test. The real battle was about to begin, and Zara was determined to win. Not just for herself, but for every inmate who had ever suffered under the oppressive regime of the Galactic prison. As they walked back to their cells, Zara caught snippets of conversation from other inmates. Word of their confrontation with the Chronax was spreading fast. Some spoke with awe, others with fear, but all with a newfound respect for the human and her unlikely allies. Zara allowed herself a small smile. Let them talk. Let the stories grow and change. In a place like Nexus 9, perception was often more powerful than reality. And right now, the perception was that a human, a species many had dismissed as weak and insignificant, had stood up to one of the most feared inmates in the prison. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was a start, a spark of hope in the darkness of Nexus 9, and Zara intended to fan that spark into a blazing inferno that would consume the corrupt system that had imprisoned them all. As the cell door closed behind her, Zara looked out at the vast expanse of space visible through the small, reinforced window. Somewhere out there was Earth and freedom and justice. She would find her way back, no matter the cost. The game was changing. The stakes were rising, and Zara was ready for whatever came next. The tension in Nexus 9 was palpable, a living thing that seemed to pulse through the very walls of the station. In the cycles, since their confrontation with the Chronax, Zara and her team had been busy. What had started as a small alliance had grown into a full-fledged underground resistance movement. Zara stood in a hidden alcove deep in the bowels of the station, surrounded by her core team and several new recruits. The space, once a forgotten maintenance bay, now served as their war room. Makeshift holomats flickered on the walls, showing the layout of Nexus 9 in intricate detail. We're almost ready, Zara said, her voice low but filled with determination. Rax, what's the status on the security systems? The Volucrian ruffled his feathers, a sign of excitement. I've identified the main control nodes. Once we initiate the plan, I can trigger a cascading failure that will knock out internal sensors and lock down the guard stations. Zara nodded, then turned to Zix. And our numbers. The Silosian's compound eyes glittered. We have supporters in every cell block, every work detail. When the signal comes, they'll be ready. Good, Zara replied, allowing herself a small smile. Drek, how are we on weapons? The Quilaxian's crystalline structure pulsed with pride. We've repurposed mining tools and scavenged what we could from the workshops. It's not pretty, but it'll get the job done. Lyra, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. There's something else, she said, her luminescent skin flickering with concern. I've been sensing increased anxiety among the guards. I think they suspect something is coming. Zara frowned. They couldn't afford to lose the element of surprise. Then we move now, she decided, before they have a chance to prepare. A ripple of tension went through the group. This was it. The moment they had all been working towards, planning for, dreaming of. Remember, Zara said, looking each of our allies in the eye, our goal isn't just to escape. We're going to expose the corruption of Nexus 9, the injustices committed here. We're fighting for every inmate who suffered under this system. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. It won't be easy. Some of us may not make it. But what we're doing here, it's bigger than any one of us. It's about justice, about freedom, about proving that even in the darkest places, hope can flourish. A chorus of agreement rose from the group. Zara saw determination in their eyes, a fierce resolve that transcended species and origin. They were united in purpose, a force that would shake Nexus 9 to its core. All right, Zara said, her voice steady. Let's begin. The plan unfolded with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Rax, nestled in a hidden access terminal, initiated the security breach. Throughout Nexus 9, systems began to fail. Lights flickered and died, plunging entire sections into darkness. Security doors slammed shut, trapping guards in their stations. In the confusion, Zara's allies sprang into action. In the mines, Drek led a charge of workers, their improvised weapons gleaming in the emergency lighting. In the medical bay, Lyra and her recruits seized control, securing vital supplies and freeing patients who had been subjected to unauthorized experiments. Zix's network of informants became a communication web, relaying information and coordinating attacks across the station. Inmates who had been cowed into submission for years found themselves armed, organized, and filled with a newfound sense of purpose. Zara moved through the chaos like a ghost, her human form allowing her to slip past defenses designed for larger, less agile species. She led a team towards the central control room, the heart of Nexus 9's operations. As they fought their way through the corridors, Zara couldn't help but marvel at the sight. Species that had been enemies were now fighting side by side. The Chronax, who had once threatened them in the cafeteria, was now using its massive form to shield smaller inmates from guard fire. But the guards weren't going down without a fight. As Zara's team approached the control room, they encountered heavy resistance. Energy blasts scorched the walls, and the air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning metal. "Cover me," Zara shouted, diving behind a fallen security drone. She pulled out a small device, the fruit of countless nights of secret work with Rax, if they could just get it to the main computer. A massive explosion rocked the station, nearly throwing Zara off her feet. Alarms blared, their shrill cries adding to the cacophony of battle. "What was that?" someone shouted. Zara's comm unit crackled to life. It was Zix, his voice tight with urgency. "Zara, we've got a problem. The guards have initiated the station's self-destruct sequence. We've got less than an hour before Nexus 9 tears itself apart." Zara's blood ran cold. This wasn't part of the plan. They had anticipated resistance, had prepared for counterattacks, but this was madness. "Can we stop it?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Not from here," Six replied. "It has to be done from the main control room." Zara gritted her teeth. They had no choice now. It was victory or death, not just for them, but for every living being on Nexus 9. "Push forward," she shouted, her voice carrying over the din of battle. "We take that control room, or we all die here." With renewed desperation, they fought on. Zara saw injuries mount, saw allies fall, but still they pressed forward. The control room was just ahead, its reinforced doors a final barrier between them and their goal. As they prepared for a final assault, a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Stand down. All of you." Zara turned to see the warden of Nexus 9, a towering Droxy, flanked by a squad of elite guards. His exoskeleton gleamed under the emergency lights, and his eyes burned with fury. "This ends now," the warden growled. "You've lost. Surrender, and perhaps some of you will be spared when our reinforcements arrive." Zara stepped forward, her makeshift weapon held loosely at her side. "It's over, Warden," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the alarms and the sounds of distant fighting. "Your reinforcements won't make it in time. This station is set to destroy itself in less than an hour." The warden's eyes widened in shock. "You're bluffing," he said, but Zara could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Am I?" Zara replied. "Are you willing to bet all our lives on that? Because that's what you're doing if you don't let us into that control room right now." For a long moment, silence reigned. Zara could feel the weight of countless lives hanging in the balance. Then slowly, the warden lowered his weapon. "Open the doors," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. As the massive doors slid open, Zara and her team rushed inside. The control room was a hive of activity, screens flashing with warnings and status reports. Rax immediately went to work, his talons flying over the control panels. "It's bad," he squawked. "The self-destruct sequence is locked in. I can't stop it completely, but I might be able to buy us some time." "Do it," Zara ordered. She turned to the others. "We need to evacuate the station. All of it. Inmates, guards, everyone." For the next frantic minutes, Zara coordinated the largest evacuation in the history of Nexus 9. Emergency pods were launched, carrying mixed groups of inmates and guards to safety. Ships that had been docked for supply runs were commandeered and filled to capacity. Through it all, Zara refused to leave. She stood in the control room, directing the flow of evacuees, making sure no one was left behind. "Zara, we have to go," Lyra called, her skin pulsing with fear and urgency. "The last pods are launching." Zara looked around the now empty control room. Screens were dark, systems shutting down one by one. She had done it. They had done it. Nexus 9 was finished, its reign of corruption and cruelty at an end. As they raced for the last escape pod, explosions rocked the station. Entire sections were breaking apart, venting atmosphere into the void of space. They piled into the pod, the door sealing behind them with a hiss of hydraulics. As they launched, Zara caught a final glimpse of Nexus 9 through the viewport. The massive station, once a symbol of oppression and hopelessness, was now breaking apart, its pieces scattering across the star-filled backdrop of space. In that moment, as the reality of their victory washed over her, Zara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They were free. All of them. And more than that, they had struck a blow against injustice that would resonate across the galaxy. The escape pod's communication system crackled to life. It was a general broadcast, reaching all the evacuees. "This is Captain Elara Voss of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force," a crisp voice announced. "We've received your distress signal and are moving to assist. All escape pods and vessels, please transmit your status and prepare for rescue operations." A cheer went up in their cramped pod. Zara felt tears prick at her eyes as the enormity of what they had accomplished truly hit her. Lyra placed a gentle hand on Zara's shoulder, her skin glowing with a mix of joy and concern. "What now?" she asked softly. Zara looked around at her team, at the allies who had become family in the crucible of Nexus 9. She thought of the hundreds of lives they had saved, of the corrupt system they had brought down. But she also thought of the work still to be done, of the injustices that still plagued the galaxy. "Now," Zara said, a smile spreading across her face, "we keep fighting. There are other Nexus 9s out there, other systems that need to be changed. We've proven what we can do when we stand together. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning." As their pod was drawn into the hold of a peacekeeping vessel, Zara felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had ever known. They had started as prisoners, cast aside by an uncaring galaxy. Now they were heroes, champions of justice. The story of Nexus 9 and the human who led its fall would spread across the stars. It would inspire others to stand up against tyranny, to fight for what was right. And Zara, along with her unlikely family of aliens, would be there, leading the charge. As the rescue ship's engines hummed to life, carrying them away from the scattered remains of Nexus 9, Zara looked out at the vast expanse of space before them. Somewhere out there was Earth, and the truth about her wrongful conviction. But there was also a galaxy full of possibilities, of wrongs to be righted and hope to be kindled. Zara smiled. Whatever came next, she was ready. They all were. The uprising hadn't ended with Nexus 9's destruction. In many ways, it had only just begun.